Pilot humiliates new flight attendant without imagining she'd embarrass him in front of everyone. Jennifer Collins nervously adjusted the hem of her navy blue uniform as the eyes of the entire crew watched her. It was her first flight as a certified flight attendant for Amerisky, the largest airline in the country, and she had spent years preparing for this moment. Your badge is crooked, your hair is out of regulation, and your shoes weren't properly polished, not to mention your posture. Is this how you plan to represent our company? Snapped Captain Richard Johnson, a grey-haired man with an intimidating presence, adjusting his black leather gloves as he inspected her from head to toe. Jennifer swallowed hard, her face burning with shame. The rest of the crew watched in awkward silence. She had arrived 2 hours early to prepare, checking every detail of her appearance. "I'm sorry, Captain, I'll fix it right away," she replied, trying to keep her composure as she adjusted her badge, which was in fact perfectly straight. "I don't have time for rookies who can't follow basic rules. This flight to Miami has important executives on board. One mistake and you're back in training," Richard declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. Susan, the cabin chief with 15 years at the company, gave Jennifer a sympathetic glance but quickly looked away when the captain turned toward her. "Susan, keep an eye on her. I want reports on any slip-ups," he ordered, before striding toward the cockpit with firm steps. During the pre-flight briefing, Jennifer delivered all the safety information flawlessly, the result of countless nights studying manuals and procedures. Her voice trembled slightly, but she managed to hide it. "Actually, Miss Collins, the evacuation protocol was updated last month," Captain Richard interrupted unexpectedly. "If you'd studied properly, you'd know that." Jennifer's stomach dropped. She was certain she had followed the current protocol. She had reviewed the latest update just the night before. "With all due respect, Captain, the protocol I mentioned is in effect per FAA Memorandum 275, issued 3 weeks ago," she replied, keeping her tone respectful even as her palms grew sweaty. Her heart pounded so loudly, it felt audible to everyone in the room. A tense silence fell. Richard narrowed his eyes, visibly irritated at being challenged. His expression shifted subtly, but threateningly. The wrinkles on his forehead deepened, and a flush of anger spread across his neck. His icy blue eyes locked onto Jennifer like a predator, sizing up prey. The other crew members stared at the floor, some pretending to review documents, others nervously checking their watches. The tension was palpable. No one dared breathe too loudly. Karen, a flight attendant with 15 years of experience, bit her lower lip, a habit Jennifer had noticed whenever the veteran was anxious. Brian, another attendant, unnecessarily adjusted his tie, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Their body language told a story of fear cultivated over years. 25 years of flying, miss, and I've never needed a rookie to correct me. "Keep this up and you won't even make it past probation," he shot back before stomping out of the room. As the door closed, a collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. Karen discreetly stepped closer to Jennifer. "You're technically right," she whispered, glancing sideways at the door. "But learn this fast. With Richard, being correct matters less than not contradicting him." "But what about procedure safety?" Jennifer asked, confused. Karen gave a sad smile. "Welcome to the real world of aviation, dear. Sometimes the procedures manual is less important than the unwritten manual of corporate survival." Boarding had begun, and Jennifer did her best to greet passengers with a genuine smile despite the lump in her throat. She took her position at the aircraft door, forcing herself to maintain the professional composure her mother so admired. "Head up, back straight. Smile on your lips even when your heart is heavy," Mrs. Margaret used to say, repeating the philosophy that had sustained her during her 20 years as a housekeeper for wealthy families in New York. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," Jennifer repeated mechanically as she checked boarding passes. An elderly gentleman in an impeccable suit stopped before her. "You remind me of my granddaughter," he remarked with a kind smile. "She has that same determined look. She's graduating from medical school now." That unexpected kindness nearly broke her composure. Jennifer swallowed the lump in her throat. "Your granddaughter must be very special, sir. I'm sure you're a wonderful grandfather." The man smiled, placing a wrinkled hand over hers for a moment. "When the world tries to diminish you, young "Lady, remember you're greater than your circumstances," he said, as if reading her thoughts before moving to his seat. That brief encounter restored something in Jennifer. As she organized the business class section, she noticed Richard chatting animatedly with some corporate passengers, completely transformed, charming, charismatic, a totally different person from the one who had humiliated her minutes earlier. The ease with which he switched between cruelty and charm was unsettling. During the flight, she performed every task with extreme care, while serving coffee to an elderly woman in the first. Oh, she felt the plane shake from mild turbulence, causing a few drops to spill onto the tray, though none on the passenger. "Apologies for the inconvenience," Jennifer said, to which the woman smiled understandingly. However, Richard, who happened to be passing by, didn't miss the opportunity. "We serve coffee in the cup, not on the tray, Miss Collins," he remarked, sarcastically, loud enough for several passengers to hear. The elderly woman gently intervened. "The service is perfect, Captain. It was just the turbulence." Richard forced a smile for the passenger before shooting Jennifer a sharp look and moving on. When the flight landed at Miami International Airport, Jennifer began gathering her belongings, exhausted from the emotional strain. Susan approached discreetly. "Don't take it personally. He does this to all the new hires, especially the women," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "Why doesn't anyone say anything?" Jennifer asked. Susan shrugged, a gesture carrying years of resignation. "He's untouchable. 30 years with the company, personal friends with the operations director. We've seen people transferred or invited to leave after standing up to him. Just keep your head down and survive." As she disembarked, Jennifer noticed a man around 70 watching her with interest. He had witnessed one of the moments when the captain publicly reprimanded her while she was explaining safety equipment to a family with children. At the ET time, the man had narrowed his eyes thoughtfully, a subtle reaction Jennifer caught amid the chaos. He wore a conservative navy blue suit with silver cufflinks and carried the distinguished air of someone accustomed to executive boardrooms. His neatly trimmed white hair and upright posture hinted at long-standing military or corporate discipline. As he passed by her during disembarkation, the man intentionally slowed down, keeping a respectful distance from the other passengers. "Head. The United States needs more professionals with your integrity, young lady," he said quietly, discreetly handing her a business card. "We should talk sometime. Dr. William Peterson, Administrative Advisor, Embarrass." A shiver ran down Jennifer's spine. Why would a company advisor give his card to a mere rookie flight attendant? The company's golden logo gleamed on the high-quality textured paper. Below the name, printed in smaller letters, was a quote, "Excellence is not an act, but a habit." The man smiled kindly and continued down the jet bridge, leaving Jennifer frozen, the card weighing in her hand as if it were made of lead instead of paper. During her layover at the company hotel in Miami, Jennifer couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, replaying every moment of the day. The impersonal room, with its beige walls and standard decor, seemed to close in around her. She opened the window to breathe in the Miami night air, watching the lights of the dazzling city that, under different circumstances, would have enchanted her. She picked up her phone and scrolled to the photo she kept as her wallpaper, her and her mother, Mrs. Margaret, on her graduation day at MIT. The image showed them embracing, Mrs. Margaret's eyes brimming with pride, wearing her only party dress, sewn by herself for the occasion. Her mother, who had worked as a house cleaner for families since being abandoned by her husband, had invested all her retirement savings to help her pay for flight attendant training after graduation. "You'll soar higher than all of us, my girl," she always said, repeating the words Jennifer's father used to say. The memories carried her back to the small house in Queens where she grew up, listening to the roar of planes taking off and landing at JFK International Airport. As a child, she climbed onto the roof to watch them, dreaming of the day she'd be inside one. Mrs. Margaret's sacrifice had been immense. Jennifer still remembered the nights she'd find her mother asleep at the kitchen table, her hands rough from work still clutching a needle. She sewed clothes on commission to supplement her income after her shifts as a cleaner. All so her daughter could attend good schools, Giving up isn't in our blood, sweetheart, Mrs. Margaret would say, when Jennifer, still a teenager, nearly quit a difficult prep course. How could she give up now? Jennifer got out of bed, took Dr. William Peterson's card from her purse, and examined it for the 1,000th time. She made a decision. The next morning before her return flight, she'd call the number on the card. What did she have to lose? The next morning, as she had coffee in the hotel restaurant, she spotted Rachel, a veteran flight attendant who seemed friendly. Summoning her courage, Jennifer sat at her table and asked how to handle Captain Richard. Rachel let out a deep sigh. "Honey, you've stepped into the hurricane's path. Richard Johnson is known as the executioner among flight attendants. He's made 3 cry mid-flight. 1 even quit at the next layover." Rachel lowered her voice, leaning in closer. The worst case was Amanda Wilson's about 2 years ago. Talented, experienced, spoke 4 languages. Richard had it out for her from their first flight together. "What happened to her?" Jennifer asked, a knot forming in her stomach. She had a nervous breakdown mid-flight to Paris, developed panic disorder, couldn't even step onto a plane afterward. Her brilliant career destroyed. Rachel sighed deeply. "Last I heard, she sells crafts at a little market in Key West." "But isn't that workplace harassment? Isn't there some channel to report it?" asked Jennifer, perplexed. "It exists on paper. In practice." Rachel let the sentence fade, taking a sip of coffee. "The head of operations is Richard's godfather. They were in the same class at the Air Force Academy. The HR director plays golf with him every Sunday. It's a club, you see. And we're just disposable." Rachel looked around as if afraid of being overheard, even though they were alone at the table. "There was a case. I can't name names. A flight attendant gathered evidence, documented situations, recorded conversations, followed all the official procedures." Rachel lowered her voice even further. "A week later, she was randomly selected for a drug test. Supposedly, traces of banned substances were found. She swore she'd never used anything illegal in her life. No one believed her, of course." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you suggesting it was a setup? That would be criminal." "I'm just reporting what happened," Rachel shrugged. "Draw your own conclusions. Listen, I'll give you some advice. Document everything. Every comment, every situation with dates, times, and witnesses. It might not help now, but one day, who knows? And keep everything in a safe place outside your apartment or any company property." The return to New York was even more tense. Richard seemed determined to find fault in everything Jennifer did. During the safety briefing, he appeared in the passenger cabin, something unusual, just to watch her with a critical eye. "Your oxygen mask demonstration was completely wrong," he declared after boarding ended, when they were in the galley. "If it had been a real situation, it could have cost lives." "Captain, I followed the manual procedure exactly." Jennifer defended herself, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you calling me a liar, Miss Collins?" he asked, stepping closer intimidatingly. Susan intervened, trying to diffuse the tension. "Captain, we need to start the in-flight service. I can talk to Jennifer about the demonstration later." Richard shot a withering look at both of them before returning to the cockpit. As he walked away, Jennifer noticed something in his back pocket. A small bottle that looked like alcohol. Could it be? No, she couldn't accuse a captain of something so serious without concrete proof. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing, over the following weeks, Jennifer followed Rachel's advice and meticulously documented every problematic interaction with Captain Richard. She also noticed he seemed to pick a different victim each month, always young, women always new hires. The pattern was clear. On a layover in Boston, Jennifer met Olivia, a former flight attendant who now worked at the airport as an operations coordinator. Over coffee, Olivia shared her own experience. "I worked with Richard for 6 months. It was a nightmare. I even developed panic disorder," Olivia confessed, her eyes glistening. "He made sure I was always assigned to his flights like it was a game to him." "And no one ever filed a formal complaint?" Jennifer asked. "Many tried. Me included. I still have a copy of the internal case I opened," Olivia paused, taking a deep breath. Know what happened? The case was dismissed for lack of concrete evidence. 2 weeks later, I was transferred to the Anchorage base, far from my family. I lasted 3 months before quitting. Jennifer felt a chill. Richard's power seemed to stretch across the entire company. Back in New York, she was shocked to discover she'd been assigned to 5 consecutive flights with Richard. Coincidence? Hardly. On the first of these flights, bound for New Orleans, something unexpected happened. During the meal service, a passenger in business class began showing symptoms of a severe allergic reaction. "Is there a doctor on board?" announced Susan over the PA system, following protocol. No one responded. The passenger, a middle-aged man, started having trouble breathing. Jennifer, who had taken an advanced first aid course at her mother's insistence, recognized the signs of anaphylaxis. "Susan, we need the emergency medical kit," Jennifer said urgently. "I think he's having a severe allergic reaction." Captain Richard appeared in the cabin, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked, visibly annoyed by the disruption. "Possible anaphylaxis, Captain," Jennifer informed him. "We need to check if he has an epinephrine auto-injector or use the one from the emergency kit." "Don't be alarmist. It's probably just indigestion," Richard scoffed. "Give him an antacid and monitor him." The passenger's face began to show signs of swelling, and his breathing became more labored. Jennifer knew there was no time for debate. "With all due respect, Captain, I recognize the signs of anaphylaxis from my emergency medical training. If we don't act now, his life could be at risk," she said with a conviction she didn't know she had. Susan had already retrieved the medical kit and handed it to Jennifer. Richard, surprised by the usually submissive flight attendant's firmness, hesitated for a moment. "Do what you think is necessary, but the responsibility is yours," he finally said, stepping back toward the cockpit. Jennifer quickly checked with the passenger, who managed to confirm he had a peanut allergy and that his auto-injector was in his checked luggage. She administered the epinephrine from the emergency kit, monitored his vitals, and provided supplemental oxygen. Within minutes, the passenger's condition began to improve. When the flight landed in New Orleans, a medical team was already waiting to assist him. Before being taken away, he held Jennifer's hand. "You saved my life. I'm Dr. Edward Thompson, Director of University Medical Center. I want you to know I'll make sure to commend your competence to the airline." That was the first time Jennifer saw something resembling respect in Susan's and the other crew members' eyes. But Richard's reaction was the exact opposite. At the hotel, he called her for a private talk in the lobby. "You disobeyed a direct order from me today," he began, his voice controlled but filled with anger. "That's insubordination." "Captain, it was a medical emergency. I followed the response protocol as per my training," Jennifer replied, standing her ground. "Your training?" he laughed sarcastically. "How long have you been a flight attendant? 3 months, and you think you know more than a captain with 30 years of experience?" "In medical emergencies, I follow my specific training. I have advanced certification in first aid and basic life support," she explained without backing down. Richard stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Listen carefully, girl. You might have impressed that passenger today, but don't fool yourself. As long as I'm captain, you're just a flight attendant following orders. Stay in your lane, or I guarantee your career will be shorter than a shuttle flight." That night, Jennifer called her mother, crying. "Mom, I don't know if I can take this. It's like he enjoys humiliating me." "Sweetheart, remember your grandmother's story?" Mrs. Margaret asked calmly. "She was the only woman operating machines at the factory in the 60s. Every day, the men would hide her tools, sabotage her work, and say a woman's place was in the kitchen. You know what she did?" "What, Mom?" "She learned to fix those machines better than any of them. When the main machine broke down and no one could get it working, she was the one who solved the problem. After that, no one messed with her again." Sometimes, dear, the best response isn't to confront directly, but to be so good they can't ignore you. Her mother's words echoed in Jennifer Collins' mind. Maybe it was time for a different approach. On the next flight, she decided to change her strategy. Instead of reacting defensively to Richard Johnson's provocations, she began anticipating his criticisms. She obsessively studied every procedure, every protocol. When he commented on her hairstyle, she calmly showed him the company memorandum that specified the exact style she was wearing. Noticing that Richard often questioned the flight attendant's technical knowledge, Jennifer started studying aspects of aviation that weren't typically part of cabin crew training: aircraft systems, navigation procedures, aeronautical meteorology. Knowledge was power, and she was determined to arm herself. During a layover in Washington, D.C., while reviewing flight reports in the crew room, Jennifer noticed something odd. Comparing fuel records with distances traveled, she spotted a pattern. Flights commanded by Richard consistently reported lower fuel consumption than expected, something practically impossible given the weather conditions and routes. Poking. Through reports that don't concern you. Richard's voice startled her from behind. Jennifer's heart raced, but she kept her composure. Just studying fuel consumption patterns, Captain. Part of my professional development is understanding all aspects of the operation, she replied calmly. He snatched the papers from her hand. Your professional development should be limited to serving coffee and demonstrating emergency exits, he said dismissively. Let the pilots handle what really matters. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. The discrepancies in the reports troubled her. She knew airlines strictly monitored fuel consumption, not just for safety, but because it was one of the biggest operational costs. If a captain consistently reported unrealistic numbers, he could be compromising safety calculations or dangerously conserving fuel. The next morning, during the pre-flight briefing, the co-pilot Michael, younger than Richard and usually quiet, seemed to notice Jennifer's interest in technical details. Looks like someone's been studying cockpit procedures, he remarked, when Richard stepped out briefly. Just trying to understand the full operation, Jennifer replied cautiously. Michael glanced around, making sure they were alone. I've seen how Richard treats you. It's not right, he said quietly. And it's not just you. I've seen it before. Why doesn't anyone do anything? Fear. He has powerful connections at the company. And also, Michael hesitated as if weighing whether to continue. There are other issues. Things that happen in the cockpit that passengers and cabin crew don't see. Before he could elaborate, Richard returned, and Michael quickly changed the subject. But that brief conversation confirmed Jennifer's suspicions. There was more going on than just visible abusive behavior. On subsequent flights, she began noticing other details. How Richard occasionally left the cockpit at odd times, always carrying a small personal bag. How he returned with a different breath, masked by mints. How sometimes his pupils seemed off after long overnight flights. During a particularly turbulent flight between Denver and San Diego, Jennifer noticed Richard seemed especially irritable, his reflexes slower than usual. When she needed to go to the cockpit to serve meals, she noticed an unmistakable smell of alcohol, very subtle but present. Her heart raced. A drunk captain was one of the most serious violations possible in civil aviation, but accusing a pilot of that caliber without concrete proof would be professional suicide. She needed to be cautious. During the layover in San Diego, Jennifer found Michael again at the hotel restaurant. Gathering her courage, she sat at his table. "Can I ask you something?" she began. "It's about Captain Richard." Michael instantly looked uncomfortable. "Jennifer, some things are better left unknown. He drinks during flights, doesn't he?" she asked directly, keeping her voice low. Michael's face paled and he glanced around nervously. "I can't confirm or deny that," he finally replied, "but let's just say I've been requesting a transfer to another base for months, with no luck. Why don't you report him?" Michael gave a bitter laugh. "With what proof? My word against his, and even if I had proof, do you think the company would want the scandal? One of their most decorated captains accused of something like that? It'd be easier for them to label me as a troublemaker and ruin my career." Jennifer felt a weight in her stomach. The situation was even worse than she'd imagined. It wasn't just about workplace harassment, it was about flight safety, the lives of hundreds of passengers potentially at risk. "There has to be something we can do," she insisted. Michael studied her for a moment as if gauging her determination. "Look, I'm not telling you to do this, but there's a procedure to request alcohol testing. Any crew member can request it anonymously if they suspect a colleague is impaired. The problem is, it's rarely truly anonymous. Somehow, the person always finds out who filed the report. The next morning, Jennifer received an unexpected notification. She had been removed from Richard's schedule and reassigned to smaller regional flights, operated with smaller aircraft and less desirable routes. The message was clear. She was being punished for asking too many questions. Far from discouraging her, it only confirmed her suspicions. Over the following weeks, while operating flights to smaller inland cities, Jennifer took the opportunity to gather information. She spoke with crew members who had flown with Richard, discreetly researched company systems for reported incidents on his flights, and pieced together patterns. On a flight to Tampa, Jennifer attended to an elderly passenger who introduced herself as Judge Martha Green. "You seem troubled, dear," the woman remarked during the service. Something in the kindness of her gaze made Jennifer lower her guard momentarily. "Work issues, nothing important," she replied with a polite smile. "You know, I worked 40 years as a labor judge. I've learned to recognize when someone is facing workplace harassment," Judge Martha said, surprising Jennifer with her insight. "If you'd like to talk, I have plenty of experience in the matter." Upon disembarking, Jennifer accepted the card the woman offered her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. 2 weeks later, Jennifer received a notification that left her frozen. She was being summoned to a disciplinary meeting. The accusation: inappropriate behavior and questioning authority in flight. The complainant: Captain Richard Johnson. With trembling hands, she called Judge Martha, who promptly invited her for coffee. "He's attacking you preemptively," the former judge analyzed after hearing the whole story. "He sees you as a threat and is trying to discredit you before you can do anything." "What do I do?" asked Jennifer, distressed. "It's my word against his, and we all know who the company will believe." "Maybe it's not just your word," replied Martha thoughtfully. "You mentioned you documented everything, right? And that you spoke with others who went through similar situations. Yes, but, my dear, in 4 decades on the bench, I've learned that the truth rarely comes from a single source. It's patterns, coincidences that aren't coincidences, small details that form a bigger picture. You already have more than you think." With Martha's guidance, Jennifer began methodically organizing all the information she had gathered. Testimonies from former crew members, patterns in schedules, records of technical reports, discrepancies in flight logs. Separately, each element might seem insignificant, but together they formed a disturbing picture. The day before the disciplinary meeting, Jennifer received an unexpected call from Michael, the co-pilot. "I heard about tomorrow's meeting," he said, his voice tense. "Richard is boasting that he'll get you fired." "Michael, I need your help," Jennifer pleaded. "You've witnessed how he treats me, how he treats other crew members, and about the other issues we discussed." A long silence followed on the other end of the line. "I have a wife, 2 young kids. This job is all I have," he finally replied, his voice heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry, Jennifer, truly." The call ended, leaving Jennifer with a sinking feeling of abandonment. Even those who recognized the problem feared the consequences of confronting it too much. The next morning, her heart racing but determined, Jennifer arrived for the meeting at Amerisky's administrative building. To her surprise, upon entering the conference room, she found not only the HR representative, but also Dr. William Peterson, the advisor who had given her his card months earlier, and an imposing middle-aged woman she didn't recognize. "Miss Collins, I'm Victoria Johnson, Director of Compliance at Amerisky," the woman introduced herself. "This meeting was requested by Captain Richard, but given the circumstances, we thought it prudent to expand it." Jennifer felt a chill down her spine. Johnson, was she related to Richard? If so, her chances had just plummeted. Richard entered the room, wearing a confident smile that vanished when he saw the others present. "Victoria, William, what are you doing here? This is just a simple disciplinary matter," he questioned, clearly unsettled. "Please sit, Richard," Victoria instructed with professional detachment. As you know, any disciplinary procedure against an employee on probation requires independent review. Jennifer observed the dynamic, trying to understand what was happening. Richard's air of confidence had been replaced by visible tension. "Miss Collins," the HR representative began, "Captain Johnson has filed a series of complaints about your professional performance. Issues such as insubordination, inappropriate, questioning of authority in the cockpit, interference in matters beyond your scope, and disruptive behavior with other crew members." Richard nodded emphatically at each accusation, as if already savoring victory. "Captain Johnson is an exemplary professional with decades of impeccable service," the man continued. "His evaluations carry significant weight in decisions regarding probationary employees." Jennifer took a deep breath, knowing this was her moment to speak. "I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the situation," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "Over the past few months, I've been the target of a systematic campaign of workplace harassment by Captain Richard." She opened her meticulously organized folder. "I have here detailed documentation of each incident, including dates, times, witnesses, and context. I've also gathered testimonies from former crew members who experienced similar situations, establishing a clear pattern of behavior." Richard's face paled as Jennifer began methodically presenting the evidence. Reports of public humiliation, unfounded criticism, inconsistent rule enforcement, and retaliation after the allergic reaction passenger incident. "This is outrageous," Richard interrupted, standing up. "This employee is clearly trying to divert attention from her own inadequate performance. Who are you going to believe? Her or me, someone who has dedicated my life to this company?" Victoria raised her hand, silencing him with a gesture. "Miss Collins, these are serious accusations. Do you have anything else to add?" Jennifer hesitated. Should she mention her suspicions about alcohol consumption? Without concrete proof, it might seem like a desperate attempt to tarnish the captain's reputation. "Yes, there's one more aspect," she finally said. "During my investigation, I identified significant discrepancies in Captain Johnson's flight reports, particularly regarding fuel consumption." She presented the charts and tables she had prepared, showing how Richard's flight systematically reported below-average fuel usage compared to the fleet standard. To a layperson, this might seem efficient. To someone who understands aviation, it suggests either dangerously cutting corners or falsifying reports, she explained. A heavy silence filled the room. William Peterson exchanged a meaningful glance with Victoria. "Captain Johnson, what do you have to say about these discrepancies?" William asked. "I'm simply a more efficient pilot than average," Richard replied, defensively. "My experience allows me to optimize every flight." "Interestingly," Victoria interjected, "we recently received an anonymous report from the Flight Safety Department about unusual fuel consumption patterns. We hadn't made the connection until now." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "This is ridiculous. You're taking the word of an inexperienced flight attendant on technical piloting matters." "Actually," Jennifer replied, summoning all her courage. "Besides being a flight attendant, I'm an aeronautical engineer graduated from MIT. I worked 2 years in the technical department at American Aerospace before pursuing my dream of flying as cabin crew." The revelation landed like a bombshell in the room. Richard's face flickered between disbelief and rage. "Why isn't this in your resume?" asked the HR representative, surprised. "It's in my full resume. But when I applied as a flight attendant, I was advised to submit a simplified version. Apparently, being overqualified could hurt my chances, since the company might worry I wouldn't stay in the role long." Victoria studied Jennifer with newfound interest. "Miss Collins, if I may ask, why would someone with your background choose to work as a flight attendant?" Jennifer smiled faintly. "My mother was a flight attendant for 15 years, until health issues forced her to retire. I grew up hearing her stories, dreaming of seeing the world like she did. Engineering came later, from my passion for understanding how things work. I always planned to combine both careers eventually." William cleared his throat, drawing attention back to himself. "I believe we have enough information to make a decision on this matter," he declared. "Captain Johnson, given the seriousness Of the accusations and the thorough documentation provided by Miss Collins, we are suspending you pending a formal investigation." Richard stood abruptly, his face red with fury. "This is absurd. 30 years of an impeccable career. And you believe the lies of a rookie? Victoria, I thought I could at least count on you. Precisely because I'm your cousin that I initially refused to participate in this case," Victoria replied with professional detachment. "But when multiple complaints landed on my desk in recent weeks, I couldn't ignore them." "What complaints?" asked Richard, confused. "After the incident with Dr. Edward Thompson, the passenger with the allergic reaction that Miss Collins attended to, we started receiving reports. Apparently her behavior inspired others to finally speak up," explained Brian. "Dr. Thompson himself, in addition to filing a formal commendation for Miss Collins' actions, expressed concerns about your conduct, Captain." Richard looked stunned. "This is a conspiracy. You can't do this to me. I have powerful friends in this company." "Exactly why the investigation will be handled by an independent external team," Victoria replied impassively. "Now I ask that you leave and await further instructions. Your access badge will be temporarily deactivated." Trembling with anger, Richard headed for the door but turned to Jennifer before leaving. "You don't know who you're messing with, girl. This isn't over." After he left, Victoria turned to Jennifer. "Miss Collins, I appreciate your courage in bringing these issues to light. I'm deeply sorry for what you've endured." "What happens now?" asked Jennifer, still processing the sudden turn of events. "A full investigation," Brian answered. "Not just into the workplace harassment, but also the technical concerns you raised. If your suspicions about falsified reports and possible alcohol impairment are confirmed, the consequences will be severe." "And what about me?" Jennifer asked, aware that reporting a powerful superior rarely ended well for the whistleblower, even when the accusations were proven. "As for you," Victoria interjected with a faint smile, "I believe we have an interesting opportunity to discuss. Our Operational Safety Division has been looking for someone with dual training in cabin operations and aeronautical engineering. It would be a role that lets you use all your skills, focusing on improving procedures and preventing situations like the one you faced." Jennifer's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. "But I'm still on probation as a flight attendant. Sometimes people end up where they belong through unexpected paths," Brian mused. "Your meticulous documentation, technical analysis, and above all, moral courage are exactly what we need." As she left the meeting, still reeling from the events, Jennifer found a surprise in the hallway. Michael, the co-pilot, was waiting nervously. "You came," she said, surprised. "At the last minute," he admitted sheepishly. "I brought this." Michael handed her an envelope. "These are the records I kept of flights with Richard over the last 6 months. Times he left the cockpit inexplicably, erratic behavior, moments when I discreetly stepped in to correct his mistakes. I didn't have the courage to come forward before, but you inspired me." "What made you change your mind?" Jennifer asked, touched. Michael hesitated before answering. "Last night, my 12-year-old daughter told me she wants to be a pilot when she grows up. I realized what kind of aviation industry I was helping preserve for her with my silence." He paused. "I also realized what kind of example of courage I was setting, or not setting." Jennifer impulsively hugged him. "Thank you, Michael. This means so much." That night, Jennifer called her mother with tears in her eyes, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief and vindication. "Mom, you won't believe what happened today. In the following weeks, the key investigation confirmed all accusations against Richard, uncovering even more cases of harassment dating back years. Toxicology tests proved the presence of alcohol in his system during several flights, a scandal the company tried to cover up, but which eventually leaked to the press. Richard was permanently removed and had his pilot's license suspended. Jennifer took on her new position in the Operational Safety Division, where one of her first initiatives was to develop an anonymous and truly secure channel for reporting harassment and safety violations. The system, named SafeVoice, allowed any employee to report issues without fear of retaliation. 6 months later, during a recognition ceremony for her work on the program, Jennifer was surprised to see Susan, the former chief flight attendant, approach her with a timid smile. "I wanted to thank you," Susan said, visibly emotional. "For years we stayed silent about behavior we knew was wrong, afraid of losing our jobs. You showed that change is possible." "I didn't do it alone," Jennifer replied sincerely. "It took many voices." Susan nodded understandingly before adding, "You know, several younger flight attendants have been asking about you. You've become something of a legend among the crew." Jennifer laughed, embarrassed. "I just did what needed to be done. And that's exactly why you matter. You showed we don't have to accept abuse as part of the job or some initiation ritual. You changed the culture." At a company event a few months later, Jennifer ran into Judge Martha Green again, who had been invited to speak about workplace harassment in corporations. "I used your case as an example of courage and persistence," the former judge confessed. "I left out names, of course, but the essence is there." "It's strange being seen as a symbol," Jennifer remarked, uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not you, dear, it's your actions," Martha gently corrected. "What you did set a precedent. Other employees now have a model to follow when facing similar situations." For Jennifer, the most rewarding moment came a year after the famous disciplinary meeting. While attending a training session for new crew members, a young aspiring flight attendant raised her hand during the module on professional ethics. "Is it true that a probationary flight attendant was the one who reported the captain for drinking on duty?" the young woman asked with admiration. The instructor glanced briefly at Jennifer, who was observing from the back of the room, before answering, "Yes, it's true. And it teaches us two fundamental lessons. First, that safety is everyone's responsibility, regardless of rank or hierarchy. Second, that one courageous person can inspire change that benefits everyone." After the session, as the room was nearly empty, the young woman approached Jennifer shyly. "Excuse me, but it was you, wasn't it? The flight attendant in the story." Jennifer smiled kindly. "What matters isn't who did it, but that anyone can, even you, if the day ever comes." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On a sunny morning 2 years after the events that changed her life, Jennifer walked through Miami International Airport in her executive uniform from the safety division. Her new role perfectly combined her technical skills with her cabin experience, allowing her to implement improvements that truly made a difference in the crew's daily lives. As she passed the boarding area, a scene made her pause. A senior captain was speaking respectfully to a rookie flight attendant, patiently explaining a procedure. The young woman asked questions without hesitation, clearly feeling safe to express her doubts. "Quite the change, isn't it?" remarked a voice beside her. Jennifer turned and saw Michael, now promoted to captain. "You had a lot to do with this," he continued. "Remember how it used to be? Flight attendants, especially the new ones, hardly dared to make eye contact with certain captains." "There's still a lot of work ahead," Jennifer replied. "But yes, it's good to see the change." "How's the new cabin manual project coming along?" Michael asked. Jennifer smiled, excited. "Almost done. For the first time, we're incorporating direct suggestions from cabin crew based on real experiences. It'll eliminate a lot of inconsistencies that cause confusion during emergencies." "And that other project of yours? The mentorship for newcomers?" "Caring wings," Jennifer answered proudly. "We already have 50 veteran volunteers guiding new crew members. We've broken the cycle of learn through suffering that dominated aviation culture." As they walked together through the terminal, Michael said thoughtfully, "You know, my daughter still wants to be a pilot. Now when she talks about it, I feel pride instead of worry. I know when she enters the industry, she'll find a better environment than the one we faced." That afternoon, Jennifer received an email that moved her deeply. The American Flight Attendants Association had invited her to be the keynote speaker at their annual conference, with the theme Transforming Toxic Hierarchies into Safe Leadership. As she prepared her presentation that evening, Jennifer reflected on her journey. She could never have imagined, back on that first flight when Richard had publicly humiliated her, that one day she'd be helping transform the culture of an entire industry. Her speech would begin with a phrase that had become her mantra. Safety isn't just about technical procedures, it's about people feeling safe to speak the truth. One Sunday morning, while having coffee with her mother, in New York, Jennifer was surprised by a newspaper headline. Richard Johnson had been hired by a small foreign airline, one of those with questionable safety standards operating in countries with weak regulations. "That's not fair," Mrs. Margaret said indignantly. "After everything he did, he just gets to start over somewhere else." Jennifer sighed, feeling a pang of disappointment. "Unfortunately, it happens a lot in this industry, Mum. Problematic people just hop from company to company, especially if they have valued technical experience." "And there's nothing you can do?" Jennifer thought for a moment. Actually, maybe there is. In the following weeks, working discreetly with international contacts she'd developed, Jennifer helped create an information-sharing network among safety departments of different airlines. The focus wasn't punishment, but prevention, ensuring problematic behavior patterns didn't go unnoticed across borders. The initiative, initially limited to a few South American companies, began gaining international traction, with major airlines recognizing its value for global safety. At an aviation symposium in Santiago, Jennifer presented the program, carefully structured to respect labor and privacy laws while still protecting passengers and professionals. "What happened to that specific captain who inspired all this?" an executive asked after her presentation. "This isn't about one individual," Jennifer replied diplomatically. "It's about recognizing that systematic problems require systematic solutions. The aviation industry is global. Our approach to safety must be too." Back in the United States, Jennifer found a surprise on her desk, a letter from the Federal Aviation Administration inviting her to join a special committee that would review safety reporting protocols nationwide. "Congratulations," said Victoria Johnson, now CEO of Embarrass, when she saw the letter. "Your work is making an impact far beyond our company." "I never imagined I'd come this far," Jennifer confessed. "I just wanted to do my job without being harassed." "The biggest changes often start with the simplest, fairest goals," Victoria mused. "By the way, I have more news for you." "What?" "The board approved your educational program for technical schools. We're sponsoring lectures across the country on safety culture and respect in aviation, starting next semester." Jennifer could hardly believe it. The project, which she had proposed months earlier, aimed to reach future aviation professionals before they even entered the industry, planting the seeds of a healthier culture. On a flight to Washington, D.C., where she would attend the first FAA committee meeting, Jennifer was recognized by an elderly passenger. "You're that engineer who reported the pilot who was drinking, aren't you?" the woman asked. "My granddaughter works in aviation and told me your story. She said you changed everything." Jennifer smiled, slightly embarrassed. "The changes were a collective effort, ma'am. Many brave people contributed." "But someone had to take the first step," the woman insisted. "As my grandmother used to say, one candle can light 1,000 others without losing its own flame." Those words stayed with Jennifer as she gazed out the airplane window, watching the United States pass below. She remembered that first flight, the fear, the humiliation, the helplessness, and then the moment she decided she wouldn't accept that situation anymore, not just for herself, but for everyone who would come after. That afternoon in Washington, D.C., as she entered the FAA meeting room, Jennifer noticed something interesting. Of the 12 people on the committee, 7 were women, including the chair, a veteran pilot with over 30 years of experience. "Welcome, Jennifer," the chair greeted her. "Your work at Embarrass has been inspiring to many of us, especially your approach that goes beyond punishment, focusing on real cultural change." "Thank you, but I admit I'm surprised to be invited. I still consider myself relatively new to the industry." "Sometimes we need fresh eyes to spot problems. We've normalized," the chair replied. "And besides, you've shown a rare combination of personal courage and systemic vision." The meeting lasted hours, with intense discussions about improving safety reporting systems in the United States. Jennifer shared her experience with the Safe Voice program and how combining true anonymity with transparent feedback had led to a 300% increase in relevant reports. During a break, Jennifer was approached by a white-haired gentleman who introduced himself as Robert Davis, one of the first American pilots to fly large commercial jets, now a consultant for the agency. "I just wanted to say how much I admire your work, young lady," he said sincerely. "When I started in aviation in the 1960s, the environment was, well, brutal would be putting it politely. We've seen many changes over the decades, but what you're doing now is truly transformative." "How so?" Jennifer asked, genuinely curious. "Because you're tackling the root of the problem," Robert explained. "Not just the visible behaviors, but the underlying culture that allows them. Do you know how many times I've seen good professionals, especially women and people from minority groups, leave aviation because they couldn't stand the environment? Hundreds. A tragic waste of talent." Back in New York, Jennifer visited her old school, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, this time as a guest speaker. She addressed a packed auditorium of future aerospace engineers about the importance of human systems as much as technical systems. "Aviation has reached impressive levels of technical safety," she explained. "Today, our biggest challenges lie at the interface between people, equipment, and organizations. The weakest link is rarely the technology, but how people interact with each other and with the systems." After the lecture, a student asked, "Aren't you afraid of retaliation, of being labeled as troublesome in the industry?" Jennifer smiled, understanding the fear behind the question. "At first, yes. But I realized something important. When you stand up for principles that benefit everyone, you eventually find allies. Change is never easy or without risks, but the risk of staying silent, of normalizing harmful behavior, is far greater in the long run." 3 years had passed since the confrontation with Richard. Jennifer, now the National Director of Safety, Culture at the FAA, had just returned from an international conference in Singapore, where the American model of cultural transformation in aviation had been highlighted as an example. In her office, she found a plain envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten card from Judge Martha Green. "Dear Jennifer, I watched your TV interview yesterday. I'm so proud of the woman you've become and the changes you've helped create. I remember the frightened young woman I met on that flight, determined but unsure if she could make a difference. There's a saying I always repeat to my grandchildren: courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something is more important than fear. You embody that perfectly. With admiration, Martha." Jennifer felt her eyes well up as she read those words. So much had changed since those turbulent early flights. The girl who had only dreamed of flying around the world like her mother had found a greater mission. That same afternoon, she received an unexpected call. Michael, now the chief flight instructor, inviting her to a special ceremony. "My daughter Emily was accepted into the cadet program," he announced proudly. "She insists you be there for the initiation ceremony. She says you're her inspiration." "I'd be honored," Jennifer replied, moved. "You know what she told me the other day?" Michael continued. "That thanks to people like you, she doesn't have to be afraid of entering aviation as a woman. That she can focus on being the best pilot possible without wasting energy fighting harassment or disrespect." Those words touched Jennifer deeply. This was exactly the world she had dreamed of building, not just for herself, but for all the Emilys who would come after. At the cadet ceremony, as she watched the young aspirants, including Michael's daughter, pledge their dedication to safety and excellence in aviation, Jennifer couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. "This is a promising class," remarked the Academy's director, standing beside her, "and the most diverse we've ever had. 40% women, a record." "That's wonderful," Jennifer replied. "But what matters most is the culture they'll find when they graduate. The one you helped transform," the director reminded her. "You know, we implemented your reverse mentoring program here. Our cadets spend a month observing and analyzing organizational culture at partner companies, then share their insights with senior leadership." "How's it working?" "Surprisingly well. The veterans resist at first but end up valuing the fresh perspective. As you always say, safety is built on the ability to hear every voice." After the ceremony, Emily, Michael's daughter, shyly approached Jennifer. Miss Collins, I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done. My father told me your story in great detail, how you stood up to that captain even as a rookie, how you refused to give up even when everyone told you to accept things as they were. Jennifer smiled at the young woman. You'll have your own challenges, Emily. Different from mine, I hope, but just as important. The industry has evolved, but there's still much work to be done. And I want to be part of it, the young woman said with determination. Like you. Just Jennifer, please, and I'm sure you'll do even more. Each generation builds on the achievements of the last. That's real progress. The next morning, during an interview for a specialized industry magazine, Jennifer was asked what she considered her greatest legacy. I don't think in terms of personal legacy, she replied. I think of the thousands of conversations now happening openly, the problems being reported without fear, the ideas being heard regardless of rank or position. If I've contributed in any way to that, I'm satisfied. And what about the captain? You reported, the journalist pressed. Any regrets about how the case was handled? Jennifer considered carefully before answering. The goal was never to punish one individual, but to fix a system that allowed harmful behavior. It was never about him or me, but how we create an environment where everyone can do their best without fear, including him. A diplomatic answer, remarked the journalist. An honest one, Jennifer corrected. Real change doesn't come from defeating enemies, but from transforming structures and cultures so everyone can grow and contribute positively. That night in her journal, Jennifer wrote words that summed up her journey. 5 years ago, I boarded that plane as a nervous rookie flight attendant, just wanting to do my job well. Today, I see that moment of public humiliation was the catalyst for changes I could never have imagined. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, fear, and despair, but also discovery, growth, and finally transformation. The most important lesson I've learned is that systems are created by people and can be changed by people. The second lesson is that you never know who's watching, who's gathering courage from your example, like one candle lighting 1,000 others. Tomorrow I'll keep working, not for recognition or some notion of personal victory, but because there are still so many candles left to light. End of story. Dear listener, your companionship on this journey of resilience has moved us deeply. If Jennifer's story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more narratives of women's courage challenging unfair hierarchies. We'd be honored to read your thoughts about her actions in the comments.